can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, we're going to be talking about X-Men number 14. And this is an issue that I was really happy to have read. And I say that because I have not been terribly fond lately of some of the stuff that's going on with X-Men right now. It is, I'm not gonna lie, the further we get away from X-Manhunt, I think the better off I think we're all gonna be. I don't think that we need to worry about that anymore. I think it's time we get back to business as usual. And that's kind of what I like, because I feel like when all the X books are kind of not trying to cross over with each other, I feel like they have been better. When X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, Exceptional X-Men, Storm, I feel like when these books like try just to do their own thing, I think that's when they shine. And when they start trying to like get too close to one another, it's when the water gets a little muddy. And I don't think that it's a bad thing if they kind of do their own thing. I think the From the Ashes era has definitely delivered some great stories, but it's delivered some duds as well. And that's to be expected. But this issue, I'm actually really happy we're getting back to, you know, brass tacks, because we're picking up on plot points. I feel like it can be very easy to get lost in the shuffle if you've just not really been keeping up. And one of the main ones is the mystery of Piper Cobb. Yeah, I'll forgive you for that one if you're like, Piper Cobb?
Who the fuck is Renee Zellweger?
That's kind of how I felt about it too, because I was like, oh yeah, the little girl that had the mother who was an anti-mutant bigot, and turns out this girl was a mutant herself, only psych, she's not a mutant at all. Oh, but wait, yes she is. Now we know why all that was going on, and I'm actually quite happy to see this story finally get some payoff. And it's not like it's been a long time, but I mean, it definitely feels like it with all the stuff that's happened in the middle. We've had Raid on Greymalkin, we've had X-Manhunt. Now we're getting back to this. We now know the truth is that Piper is actually a mutant, sort of. The reason why her mutant X gene wasn't detected is because Piper isn't so much a mutant, her sister is. And her sister is a twin who apparently Piper absorbed in the womb, meaning that her sister is a part of her physically, and even though she was absorbed, she persisted nonetheless. Not too terribly dissimilar from characters like Charles Xavier and Cassandra Nova. Not exactly the same way that you get to the same point, but I mean, they have a lot more in common, I would say, in that regard than what they don't. Piper, we discover, like, whatever it is that her sister's, you know, talents and power were, it's something that makes her metamorphic in some way. We don't really know fully what her power is. We know there's the part of her arm that becomes transformed into what almost looks like an alligator arm or whatever, some kind of monstrous hand, but there seems to be more to her than just that. And I'm curious to know exactly how all this is going to be, you know, played up. And I'm glad we're finally getting back to it. I want to see more of this. I want to get back to these other characters that we've kind of just been forgetting about, like characters like Ben Liu, who was introduced. And for those unfamiliar, Ben Liu was the guy who was kind of slick, a reality warper. He was able to create these wild and wacky illusions that were very believable and create them on a citywide scale. He was able to make the entire world believe that San Francisco was under an alien invasion. And now we get to learn a little bit more about this character. Some of the stuff I didn't think was terribly obvious at first, like other parts of it were. There's a part where we learn a little bit more about the identity of Ben Liu as a character. The fact that he is a Chinese American male is not lost on me. It was pretty obvious he had at least some level of Asian heritage, just didn't know what it was. He is a Chinese American cisgender male, and apparently he is gay. So he ticks a lot of boxes. So if anyone would know what it was like to be an outsider or be othered, it definitely would be Ben Liu, because now he gets to add mutant to that list of boxes that will usually get him some side eye from bigots. So, and I think it's even more telling. Magneto sees great potential in him as a character. Magneto sees him as someone who could potentially become one of the next powerful heavy hitters that the X-Men are going to need, because right now they can't rely on Magneto's power because of the RLDS that he is dealing with. His powers have become incredibly uncontrollable and very out of pocket, and in some cases non-existent. And right now, Magneto sees Ben Liu as someone who he could take under his wing. I even like the meta commentary in this that Magneto even points out that he feels like Ben Liu has been lost in the shuffle, kind of confirming the very things I was just talking about earlier, that it feels like some of these characters got lost in the wind. And I like that Ben Liu is finally getting some center in this, considering this is a character who, if I remember correctly, was introduced in X-Men #2, and we're really only just now kind of getting to know him as a character. Like, this is the most I think he's really been focused on. I mean, like, he's gotten some issues off and on, but it's good to see this character actually coming back to the forefront a little bit. And then there's also Jen, the character who we were introduced to in issue #4. The character was effectively an Animorph. We saw, like, when she was initially introduced in X-Men #4, she had an aquatic appearance. And then we saw very recently, right before X-Manhunt, I believe, that she had the ability to turn into an avian appearance, something she's leaning a little more into now. And there's also the promise that she has other abilities, or other forms rather, that she could take. And there's even been the hint that it's the animal instincts that she's also adopting when she takes on these various forms. And I like how both Beast and Cyclops point out the potential in this, that because of the nature of her power, even though she's not accustomed to these forms, she naturally has the instincts that these forms would require of her to maximize the abilities that she now has in whatever form she's taken on. So that means that, yeah, she's taken on that aquatic form when we first saw her. That meant she instantaneously knew, even if she didn't know how to swim, she immediately knew how to swim, she immediately knew how to breathe underwater, and she immediately knew that she would be safe in what was effectively below freezing temperature waters, despite the fact that up until just a few seconds prior to jumping in, she was a normal person, not some aquatic figure. And in this avian form, she now has a raptor instinct. So, like, they're talking like, oh, hey, don't dive bomb Piper if you see her. I thought that was really cool, and I want to learn more about these characters. I feel like these two characters, it kind of reminds me of the 90s, back when characters like Dr. Cecilia Reyes and Maggot were introduced, how those characters, I feel like, oh, okay, this is a new generation of X-Men characters that are going to become something special. And I think we all know how that turned out. Dr. Cecilia Reyes, well, I think she has her fans, and I am one of them. I feel like she's not a character that people really think much of and doesn't get used very often, at least up until recently. She's a part of X Factor, but that book has been canceled. And, she's also been a part of the Krakoan era, but just about every time we saw her, she was literally getting killed. So it was just like, she kind of felt like a character that Marvel just didn't know what to do with. And we also had Maggot, kind of the same problem. They said this huge big to-do about Maggot and never did anything with it.
Ever.
And now they're finally doing something with him now that Murewa has taken Maggot under his wing over on the Storm series and, paired him up with, Storm over there. So, it's one of those things. I really hope that these two characters, Ben and Jen, also I just realized their names rhyme. That's crazy. Anyway, the fact that these two characters, I want to see them do something with these guys. I want to see more. I'd like to see more. There's also 3K. 3K, I would forgive you if you forgot about 3K. No one's checking for 3K. No one really is. But, we get to see them back again. This time, we see the Krakoan and Cassandra Nova going by very, silly code names in this particular instance, but code names that make sense considering that they're trying to obfuscate their operation. But at the end of the day, I actually appreciate that one of the characters that is a part of 3K has been revealed, and he's not a mutant. He's actually not even a new character. He is someone who, I would forgive people for not remembering this guy, but his name is Wyre, and he's from the OG Alpha Flight comic. And he is intrinsically tied to characters like Wild Child. He's actually largely the reason why Wild Child got some of his secondary mutation shenanigans a ways back. Wyre, for not being a mutant, he's a guy who isn't really overly fond of them. He kind of falls into the same category as characters like Mr. Clean, who popped up during towards the tail end of the Krakoan era for the first time in some years. He's one of those guys that I think, while is not the most important character in the world, he's a character that is kind of interesting in what he brings to the table, having those weird red tendrils coming out of his throat, and also having what is effectively filed off teeth. He's a weird character. I would forgive anyone for not really knowing who this guy is. Wyre's inclusion in this is interesting just based on the fact that he's working with 3K, what seems to be a pro-mutant organization, and he is big and bad enough to make some pretty bold claims. Like, I don't remember every single issue of anything he's been in, but he hasn't been in very much stuff. He's been in like no more than 15, 16, maybe 17 comics tops. But comparing his kill potential to the legacy virus is wild. This is wild. I don't really know a whole heap of a lot about him as a character. Once again, I'm more of a recent convert to 90s Alpha Flight, but I'm willing to go with it as long as it's good.